Headline: Call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven. For thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect. And in thy book all my members are written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. But now, O Lord, thou art our Father, we are the clay, and thou our potter, and we are all the work of thy hand. Psalm 139, 13-16, Isaiah 64, 8, Matthew 23, 2. In the beginning, God and Mother Wisdom created all the children that they desired in one day, and God rested from his labors. Genesis 1, 14-18. You are to understand that we are the stars of God. Genesis 22, 15-17, Isaiah 66, 7-9, Revelation 12, 1-2 day, Secrets 38-12. All these infant spirits were placed in God's nursery in heaven until their time to face the dragon on the earth stage in their designated generations. This education exercise is part of God's family plan. Somewhere up there, each of us abides until our advent and revelation on the earth stage. Adam was the first spirit to receive a clay suit to mask his true spirit ID because of the negative stigma and stain we would receive in our exercise with the dragon. Ecclesiastes 1:13, Romans 8, 18-22, from Peter's vision of animals and birds on a sheet, which first descended from heaven and after a short time ascended back up there again, we find that men come down to the earth in ignorance and behave like beasts as a result of demonic control. Psalm 49:20, Isaiah 11, 6-12, Acts 10, 9-16. But the spirits of men must be altered to remove the beastly behavior learned on the earth. Isaiah 13:12, Jeremiah 18, 1-6, Malachi 3, 1-3. This change in the daily sacrifices redeemed from the earth was observed by John. Revelation 5, 9-11, 6, 9-11, 7, 9-15. With this preliminary information understood in your mind, we are now set to discuss our title. On this earth, most men do not know God. They do not understand the creations nor God's purpose for it. Men do not know of their own glorious origin or spiritual heritage. We do not know our true ID. Matthew 11, 25-27. Even worse than this, men are ignorant about the powers and purpose of devils in God's scheme of things, and some do not believe there is a God or that devils exist. For that reason, the earth prison, Ecclesiastes 4, 13-14, Isaiah 8, 21-22, was seen in vision in great darkness, under the control of the powers of darkness. Isaiah 9, 2, 7, 8, 62, Ephesians 6, 12. The word Jesus was sent as a bright light to dispel that darkness, but one must believe his words if he is to have hope of seeing. Nevertheless, the dragon overcame the churches and took control of their doctrines so that they were observed by the Spirit as sleeping virgins. Daniel 7, 21-22, Matthew 25, 1-5, Revelation 13, 4-7. These are the conditions men are in today, the mire that the Christian world is in, although every church will swear to you that they are in the light and are wide awake. Judge for yourself if these scriptures can be broken by the efforts of today's evangelists, and if Matthew 24, 1-2 exempted any or all of them. Here is what you must realize about human thought. It is under the influence of devils who impute their peculiar vision as picture images in our minds, corrupting our understanding and mental reasoning. Ezekiel 8, 2-12. You are to understand that the house of the Lord, in this analogy, is your body, 1 Corinthians 6:19, and chambers of imagery is your head, 2 Corinthians 10:3-6. So the Battle of Armageddon is a head war, and the news telecasts tell us men are losing. Men are losing because we cannot control our thoughts, nor prevent them from having an influence on our actions. Proverbs 16:1-2, Jeremiah 10:23. Only God can break the headlock devils have over all humanity. Job 36:8-12, Psalm 74:14, Isaiah 27:1, 61:5. Under these conditions, the churches and men in general tend to be natural-minded. 1 Corinthians 2:6-15. They judge after the flesh, and they judge according to appearance. John 7:24, 8:15. Men tend to judge after the sight of the eyes and the hearing of the ears. Isaiah 11:2-4. Because of this, all human thinking is short of the glory, and unlike the mind of Christ, Matthew 7:21-23, Romans 3:23, 1 Corinthians 2:16. Mankind will get no flattering ego boost in the good news for human wisdom or his presumed power to generate his own thought, because the wisdom of man and his carnal mind is both foolishness and enmity to God. John 2:24-25, Romans 8:6-8, 1 Corinthians 1:20-21. God's thinking is totally different from human thinking and logic. It is written, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Isaiah 55:8-9. Because God authors the good news, I am his recording secretary here, you will not read familiar doctrines you are accustomed to hearing and on which you are nourished. But you will get manna, shocking lightning bolts words, which challenge and defeat the lies men teach about God, his judgment, and the status of man in general. So shall he sprinkle many nations. Do you want the latter rain? You've got it. The kings shall shut their mouths at him. For that which hath not been told them shall they see, and that which they had not heard shall they consider. Isaiah 52:15. This is what you get in the end, in the good news. Daniel 12:8-9, Revelation 10:6-11. If I have told you once, I have told you 2 or 3 times that I is not the author of the good news. This is the Creator's work, and I is just being used. Isaiah 28:16-23. This is court news from the judgment in progress. In the good news you have learned that all men are brothers and sisters, and that your spirit origin is far superior to fleshy heritage. Paul taught us that God hath made of one blood all nations in Acts 17:26. But men do not think like God, and do not think of others not in their immediate family as their brothers. And if you are of another nation or another race, you are definitely no kin to them. According to natural thinking, if you go back far enough in time, we all are descendants of Adam and Eve. If you believe the account of the creation in Genesis, some have traced family trees and discovered their ancestors and ethnic origin. They are delighted and proud of their heritage. Do you know this is all stupid and deception? It is man's wisdom. Because men judge after the flesh, they cannot really see that a Chinese and a starving Somali child is their brother, just as close to them as their own mothers. Does that statement shock you? Does it seem fantastic? If you do not feel close to all men and your feelings of close brotherliness cannot extend to the example I just gave, then you have a love problem. Your human love is short of the glory, and you are a midget when compared with the full stature of Christ. Now let us consider a few examples of man's human wisdom that all men ascribe to and have been conditioned to believe by their own personal badgerskin veil of controlling devils. 1. My descendants. Who are your descendants? 2. My lineage. Have you traced your family line back a few generations? 3. My ancestors. Do you know who are your ancestors? Those 3 questions concern ideas of origin that we have been taught in our various human cultures. I can tell you now that we have been taught a pack of errors because of the way men think, because of devils enforcing that kind of thought, and because we have a hard time believing God. We cannot relate to God's truth. We cannot see all men as our relatives, as close to us as our dear mothers after the flesh. We have a relationship problem with God. Our thinking is marred and mired in our clay suits, and we need to be born again or made over by the potter. Isaiah 64:8, Jeremiah 18:1-6. Hold your answers to those 3 questions in mind, and we will show you the real truth. We gave you a cue to what will follow in the beginning of this letter. All of us were nursery mates from the very beginning. From Peter's vision, we see how we descended from heaven only to return up there again when we die. Ecclesiastes 3:21, 12:7, 2 Corinthians 5:1-8. Therefore, all men, whoever came down previously or who will come down in the future, are your descendants. Can you see that? And what about your lineage? Your line is very short. It begins with God and ends immediately in your earthly mother's womb. All that your earthly mother supplies you is dust for God to mold a clay suit disguise for your earthly role life. All your earthly dad supplies is a thin sliver of chromosome material, again clay. You have no lines of parents, grandparents, etc., people who extend back to Adam in your family. Only the genetic code, the pattern that forms a human mold, which God gave Adam, has transferred from generation to generation, but the clay itself is different. So no man can possibly be your father when you are really a spirit. Your clay suit or stage clothes has no great importance, so your lineage is very short from God and back to God. Every man has the same kind of line. This brings us quickly to our only 2 ancestors, God and Mother Wisdom. Each human being has only 2 ancestors, and those 2 are one. Psalm 87. Tell me, why are Jews angry with Arabs over offenses that happened hundreds of years ago? No one on Earth's surface had anything to do with the slave crimes demons forced our brethren to commit against one another in their previous generations. We are not and have never been wrestling flesh and blood. This war began in heaven and continues in this earth. It is and has always been invisible slave master devils against the fleshy children of God. Since we cannot see them, they have told us that we are doing ungodly things to one another. Every prodigal son is a slave to his badgerskin veil of devils, and they are the cause and source of wars and man's inhumanity to man. In addition to this, devils hate each other. They have their own invisible nations and compete for world dominance. Human Serbs today did nothing to human Bosnians 200 years ago, but it is those invisible Serbs and Bosnians who committed crimes against one another by causing their fellow devils to fall back into the pit by killing the human bodies they possessed. Those devils fell, but climbed out of the pit when they reincarnated or infected those humans remaining alive. This has been their pattern in this hell prison God designed specifically for them. Their anger and hatred toward their fellow devils who caused them to fall has been held for centuries. This madness has been passed on to the latest generation of men who happen to be born in those parts of the world. Devils have convinced human Serbs that the ancestors of the human Bosnians did something to them, so they hate them and desire revenge. But that demonically influenced thinking is a lying fraud foisted on those people just because they happen to be born in those areas. The very demons who committed those crimes 200 or even 1,000 years ago are still there, reincarnated and controlling the newest generation of men living there. Conclusion: men need the good news like they need breath. It is the word of God, quite capable making peace and bringing about true brotherly love in men. Ignorance of God, his purposes, man's glorious origin and heritage, and deficient knowledge of the powers of darkness and how they operate has been a great disaster for our generations. Unfortunately, men consume the heads of Leviathan or take in their thoughts and leadership. Psalm 74:14, Isaiah 27:1, 61:5 are very unpleasant scriptures, but they tell the nature of the cross each human being is given to bear as his first life in the Father's education scheme. We must suffer anguish in the likeness of God's pre-family, his story. Devils have been tools to ensure that each human being will get his share of pain. They have foisted on us lies about our descendants, our lineage, and our ancestors. In every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, these lies are inherent in the cultures and taught as reality because men judge by appearance after the flesh, by the sight of the eyes and the hearing of their ears, and men think naturally very short of the glory. This human wisdom stinks, and along with devils and man's ignorance of God and Satan's control of all world religions, it is a great cause of man's inhumanity to man and failure to see all men as brothers. Isaiah 25:68, 1 John 4:6-21, Revelation 5:13, 15:3,